So it's actually been a while because one, my Pill Eater YouTube account has two strikes. One strike for just the Hank U video, which SPLC likes to use to document him, and another strike for a short story I written called Will and Angie, which I guess is sexually suggestive. But well, ever since April or May when Jim Goad of 2018, when Jim Goad got mad at me because I said he flips the fuck out on Luke Ford, because he does that a lot, but I guess you can't say that if you're loyal to him. And I guess he flagged me with a bunch of sock accounts, and I couldn't make YouTube material for 3 months. And I mean, I guess he's some punk rock dickhead, but then all of a sudden, right after that, the YouTube was striking me again for some videos where I say the N word, which is
Uh-oh.
and
Can't have that.
well, yeah, it's just more like a robotic thing. It's not really And now all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I'm seeing these strikes again, and out of all the 300 videos I have and 900 something subscribers, I just unlisted everything. I only have 3 videos up at the moment where, okay,
Yeah.
it looks like censorship. I guess Jim Goad, avant-garde hater, doesn't like me. Greg Johnson of Countercurrents doesn't like me because he doesn't like it when I say he's grooming kids for his homo nationalist empire. And now I just can't use YouTube anymore, or that just now everyone wants to censor me. I'm kind of in the same tier as Al Stankard or Holland Venison. I don't know. And so this channel, the Spinning Top Club, was just something Babylonian Hebrew suggested to me where, okay, you got to do backups. It's not the golden age of YouTube is gone. You now have mirror servers and whatnot. But I don't know if I think a few people watch this other channel, like 8 or 10, but I don't know.
I know I'm subscribed, but yeah, like you said, you haven't been posting anything in months. And so I was kind of, for a while, I'm just like, whatever happened to Pill Eater?
Well, that's kind of the short story, is that really it began in March of 2018, and I've been basically striked for more than 3, 6, 9, 12 months, an entire year I've been striked. And during that time, you really can't do it on your main account. And this is, I guess, is the backup channel. But no, at the same time, I would say productively in 2018, I did release 2 books. One that was about the Asian Aryan, collective, of the website into a book, and another about Robert Stark, which I should make an updated, it's more like zines. But this year, earlier, I had the queer culture pamphlet and my book about board games, which is on Amazon. Other than that, it's kind of trying to get into graduate school and whatnot, and just been busy with other things too. And once you have a girlfriend, that's really you only have time for. So eventually, when things clear up, and if things weren't so harsh, it's a matter of creating. I would rather want to focus on art than anything, but I don't know. I mean, this is what you get for, being to be a public image on YouTube, is all this nonsense happens.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. My wife just created a YouTube channel for me like yesterday or a day or two ago. Although I personally plan on having that separated from this persona of mine. Although maybe it won't be. I don't know what I'm gonna do with it yet, but I think probably it'll just be a martial arts channel. I don't think it'll be anything political or anything that would get censored, but I know regardless, you just get YouTube drama.
Yeah.
And then even then in the fitness community and such, it's like a religion often. People just believe what they believe, and there's no real objective reason why they do. They're just like, oh, well, my fitness idol works out like this, so it must be good. You disagree with that, then it's as heated as any political or religious debate. I've gotten banned from a bunch of fitness groups for saying, no, I don't think you can get injured doing push-ups. You can get injured doing bench presses, though. Ban, you just hate it on the bench press. It's like, I didn't know it was a sacred cow, okay?
Well, I mean, it gets to you at a point where YouTube is definitely different than it was in 2016, 2017. It changed post Charlottesville. So I'm at that point where I would rather focus on writing big material and then making it's a matter of platform, and it's an annoying capitalist thing. So
Yeah.
what else to say on the matter other than, well, yesterday actually, I know we were supposed to do this, but I was it was my girlfriend's graduation party, and I got to meet some of her quote unquote friends who are below the age of 24. And sadly, one was some bull dyke with pink hair. There was a decently looking white girl who's dating a fat Mexican kid. And it made me think. Also, there was another girl who that looked maybe on the lesbian side or had the gender neutral look. And we were playing Phase 10, and all they wanted to talk about was ironic jokes and pronouns and listen to Panic at the Disco. And I kind of felt very, being the oldest there, I felt very strange, and the Zoomer thing is kind of alienated. I don't know if you've had any experience with people below the age of 24, but I'm at the point where I feel really alienated from it.
Somehow or other, I can kind of do fellow Zoomer, fellow late millennial stuff. Like, I can pass for an undergrad even though I'm over 30. I don't know how I do it, but I do it every day. But yeah, oftentimes if I do start like getting close to them and they're talking about TV shows or I don't know, I can get lost pretty quickly because past few years since I started the law profession, I've just been out of it in pop culture. I've been trying to keep up, but I just can't.
It's, I don't know what to say about it. Like, I'm kind of above that at the moment, and I don't know. I mean, my
Oh
girl.
yeah, like I don't care. I'm not like going through some kind of midlife crisis. Oh no, I don't know the latest music or anything because all my life I've always been outside pop culture. I never really cared too much about it. I mostly knew about it from my brothers who were very much video game comic book nerds, and me just reading whatever I could get my hands on. I read those ultimate superhero guides cover to cover. I know the entire canon of all the different superheroes and such. That was back before the movies. And so when I went to college, I was hanging out with the comic book club because I was just like, hey, these people are like my brothers. I'm not sure how often I crack open a comic book, but I know the stuff. I can speak the language.
Well, that's funny. There's such a thing called comic book club, because when I went, it was either called the anime club or gamer club. Like, I don't know, it's regional.
We had all three. We had all three at my undergraduate school.
I was more associated with the anime club, and I guess the board game club left an impact on me to actually write a book about, or a zine about, board games. And so kind of on that weird, you can see an intersectionalism between all that. So I don't know.
Yeah, there really is, and I find that interesting how it just like oftentimes it's like if somebody's into video games, they're into anime. If they're into the anime, they're into the comics. You know, it's like somehow that's all together now. Whereas I remember there used to be a definite divide between anime fans and superhero fans, and now I feel like they're kind of together. I'm sure there's people who are in separate camps, but I feel like it's often the same people now.
When did you meet your wife at?
I met her in Hangzhou in 2012.
Mm.
I went on this was during undergraduate school. They had mandatory language learning and travel abroad experience at my university. They literally just started making it all mandatory the semester I was there. And I was taking Mandarin Chinese, but they did not have an opportunity to go to any part of China that spoke that as the dominant dialect. And I was like, no way am I going to, it was Macau. No way am I going to Macau. They speak Cantonese, not Mandarin. And I heard from people who went there, they were like, yeah, I often had to speak English because I couldn't get around. So I was able to hop on board a different university's trip to go to Hangzhou. And at that time, Hangzhou was much less known than it is now. And I kind of regret that because it's like every year I go there, it seems to be turning more and more into another Shanghai tourist trap. Whereas before it was much more like the tourists, it was the tourist trap, but only for the Chinese. Now I go there and it's like, I'm seeing too many white people. Not that there's, I'm not one of those, I'm down on white people, but it's more just like, I wish I have a house there and I'm just two, really. I'm just like, I wish I could just stay Chinese there.
Oh, you actually
What's that?
You have a house there?
Yeah, because I married my wife. She has 2 apartments there, and in China, like getting a place to live is astronomically expensive, and so no way are they getting rid of it, nor would she have any plans to like move out and buy her own place when her parents already own 2 properties. So
Well, I feel
yeah,
lucky for you that you actually met her during undergrad because, to be quite frank, even though I'm with my current girlfriend who is adopted Chinese, she's actually leaving me for Disney World for opportunities. And I can tell you the difference right now is that even if you're adopted Chinese in the American situation, she's, of course, she doesn't know Chinese, but she's kind of swept up in the whole neoliberal posness of everything. And it's kind of weird too, because I always fear that she actually might break up with me because she tells me all the time she's bi or something, or she'll just break up with me because she doesn't like me one day or something like that. Or that's, well, I did meet her on Tinder, but previously the girls that I've dated have always been some kind of, how could I say, kind of not stable type of loose personality that's kind of, it's very hectic in the American scene. I don't know what to say.
yeah, I hear you, and it's kind of a shame. I feel like at this point in time, political differences are very, very strong as religious differences. Like, you can't be a Christian married to a non-Christian. That's just gonna cause trouble. And I feel like it's the same thing. If you're a right wing with a left wing, I think it's very, very hard to find common ground because too much of politics gets into your day-to-day life, your culture, the way you bring up your kids and things like that. Like I feel like you gotta get on the same page. In my case, the Chinese, they're like you transplant them here in America, they're practically based. They're they're literally taught race realism in their schools, like to a very, very strong degree. And the Chinese will even, at least when my wife was in it, I'm hearing it from her, and I got into internet debates where people are like, no, they don't, all that. I'm just like, I know she isn't lying. She isn't making a debunked evolutionary theory. So they believe that the Chinese are literally the superior evolutionary race. And they use the Peking man, that fossil, to prove this. And they believe that the different races, they don't believe in the out of Africa theory. Rather, they believe like the Chinese evolved in, I can't remember the name of the theory anymore off the top of my head, but they believe the Chinese evolved separately in China, the Africans in Africa, the Europeans in Europe, rather than all the races coming from one common stock. We all came from different stock. And they'll point at like some bare basic things like, oh, white people, they have more body and facial hair than Chinese, therefore the Europeans are closer to apes than the Chinese. I mean, they literally believe and teach this stuff at least 30 years ago when my wife was in school. I don't know about now, but back then they certainly did. And if you talk with the Chinese, you see them interact, especially with their colonization of Africa. Now you can clearly see they behave that way too. They're just like, you're beneath us. So I don't have disagreements with her on a lot of alt-right things. I'm not entirely sure how well she understands this stuff. Recently, I showed her the movie Alt-Right Day of Rage. I'm just like, okay, look here. This is what's going on in America now. This is where the political camps are, and she didn't seem to like, oh, whoa, that's what's going on. She's more just like, okay, yeah, white people should be a majority. Yeah, I can see that, and she doesn't think of mass immigration or anything. So, yeah, the Chinese are already part way there, a good way.
Well, I think it's interesting that you're talking about, in white influx into these areas of tourist trap China, and whether it's the Chinese exploiting white tourists or, in this kind of strange way where a lot of, especially from Chinese and Japanese, they will certainly use white tourists and make that area only for white consumption. And it creates this illusion among white people like they're consuming there. And when they
Hangzhou it's still very much Chinese the last time I was there. But I'll say this about the Chinese, they do pride themselves on their ability to know and manipulate whites and foreigners in general. And it's been that way for decades. Like, there's a really, really good book by, her name's failing me now. But the title of the book was Stilwell and the American Experience in China. And it was about General Stilwell, who during the Second World War, he was the U.S. general placed in charge of the Chinese soldiers and under Jiang Jieshi. And he was literally in China from 1911, so like even well before the Second World War, clear until he died in 1945. And you read his memoirs and the histories of it and his complaints about the Chinese, and it's identical to now. Oftentimes you hear people say things like, oh, communism ruined the Chinese, now they do this, that, and the other thing. And it's like, no, you can see him talking about the exact same thing decades before Mao. And one of the things that the Chinese did there was they would manipulate the US for money, to get money, just to like, oh, the Japanese are hurting us, and they'll stage photos and they'll stage conquests that they did and all that for photo ops for the US journalists, and journalists would go back to the American churches and be like, oh, we need to help these poor Chinese, and they'll get money, and it'll all go to Jiang Jieshi, and then Stilwell will go up to Jiang and say, okay, I'm going to need your soldiers to go and fight the Japanese over here. And he'll be like, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And then, nope, the soldiers would disobey Stilwell. They won't move, they won't fight. And that was why he liked Mao. because Mao would fight the Japanese. And Jiang, he was pretty well just waiting for World War II to end. And then he would take all this money and guns and tanks and things that he got from the US and use that to fight Mao. He was not concerned about the Japanese at all. He was just waiting for us to beat the Japanese, was what it was.
What do you think about this interest in particularly white culture where there's this fascination in America where, anime, video games is exclusively Japanese, but, usually the typical Asian, it's like someone who's Asian is usually Chinese or some type of Chinese American. Yet there's this kind of confusion there. What do you think about this whole American Asian influx where they think, the normal Asian is a Chinese person, but supposedly has the culture of a Japanese?
Yeah, I find that interesting too. Like, if you ever look at the Fung Brothers videos on YouTube, do you know them?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and how they would do things Asian parents do. There's that series. Like, I'm watching this, I'm laughing my head off because just about every single thing in there is what my wife does. Like, it's really just, and you'll see a few comments pointing this out. It's just like, this is not Asian parents. This is what Chinese do. And
yeah,
I mean, there's a
to Asian American. One Asian American phenomenon is the Asian baby girl, which is the westernization or this idealization of trying to hood or this kind of African American type of fake macho into the woman.
Oh yeah, I've noticed that too. It seems
Fun
like a lot of
actually called it Asian baby girl for short, and I always thought that.
Yeah.
Was
But I want to talk about what you were saying about the Japanese culture being like Asian American and such. One thing that I've noticed is there is some overlap between Japanese popular culture and Chinese. And I'm not sure who's copying who or if it just kind of came about at the same time because my big exposure to China was in 2012. So I can't really speak too much about their popular culture before them, but at least then and now they have the same kind of anime and manga culture and the kawaii girls in Chinese it's called kei. They have the same kind of thing, and even my wife, she acts kind of like the anime girl stereotype. She kind of behaves that way, and yeah, like I don't know who's copying who. I think a very, very good Chinese movie to watch to see this in action is Our Shining Days. It's free on YouTube, and the entire movie is like Chinese anime culture and video game and comic book culture, and you'll see the cosplay, and I mean it's the movie's just following these Chinese nerds, so you'll get to see what the Chinese version of that looks like, and it's very, very similar. But I don't know who's copying who. In America, though, for whatever reason, Chinese popular culture, which I think is absolutely amazing, for some reason it doesn't go very far past China's borders. I think part of it is that the Chinese video services this runs on is namely a service called iQIYI, which I guess you could think of as Netflix, but like, so it doesn't like go outside China. It's on their version of Netflix, and so a lot of these movies and things don't get off of that. But I don't know. I think that in America though they don't see that. They only see Japanese popular culture, and so the Asian Americans just latch onto that.
Well, it's interesting to note as well that it seems that a lot of Asian Americans in America is already Asians in America, or for the case where you have someone who's usually adopted or Eurasian. And it's usually the Asian who is adopted or Eurasian has basically a deracination or has no values of what you're talking about. But I don't know what your observation is compared to Asian Americans in China. Would you say there's a similarity even between this kind of malaise of just this type of deracination? Do you think this is like, even when you have an Asian American who's cut from this, you could still think in terms of that person can still have those types of values? Or
I'm not sure I follow your question. Can you make it more succinct?
no, I'm saying is like, out of your question of, comparing, it seems like you're talking about Chinese, right? And I
Yeah.
feel that, from my observation, a Chinese in America, or that an American Eurasian Chinese or an adopted Chinese tends to act ways of, as a white person, yet there are some traits within. Here's the thing that's always been assumed, that Chinese women are going to be more of the tiger mom, telling you to do this and do that in a strict code without any feelings. And I definitely see that in my girlfriend, even though she's adopted. And I don't know if you've seen kind of these biological differences show up in the American situation compared to China.
Oh, yeah, that's hard to say. Normally, whenever I meet Asian Americans, they, I'll be honest, my interactions with them and the friends I've known, they pretty well did seem like white people painted yellow. Like I couldn't, at least back then, I don't know too many now, but back then before I was married, I didn't see too much of a
That's my
difference.
issue, because I feel like, one of my things is I've been nothing more than going at Asian Americans, and it seems to me that, yes, you could say they're white painted yellow, but I always feel that there is this kind of definite difference, that accordingly they're not white because, one, they're Asian or Eurasian,
Yeah,
and they definitely have their own personality differing wise. And it seems like this personality
certainly.
could be a synergy between white interest and what you're talking about in Chinese interest.
Well, because we know that race is real. We know that there's definite biological differences, and so there's going to be some things in their personality and everything that's just biologically inherent. Like one of the first time, like way before I was red pilled, and since I always was because I never went to school, but like one time I was sitting on the floor cross-legged to get things out of the cupboard that was down below a sink. And my mom, she sees me do this and she's there, don't do that. That's what your dad does. Now, I come from divorced parents. I never, ever saw my dad do that, ever, because I've seen very little of him. And so later on, then, though, throughout the years, whenever I see him and like he's getting something out of a bottom drawer, he'll sit down cross-legged Indian style and get it out. And I'm just like, I literally inherited that personality trait from him.
Mm.
You know, like I didn't learn that. I was born with that little personality trait. So certainly you're gonna see that in the races, and you're gonna see that in the Asians. I'm not sure what those traits are that the Asians inherit, but they're going to, for sure.
One of my concerns, and I'm probably going to discuss this in a future time, I feel like one thing that's always been concerning is that we live in a kind of a, I would say, this kind of somewhat post-capitalist society, where I've always had this concern where America is kind of boasts itself as this project of multiculturalism and diversity, and yet you see more of these bubbles being created where, you're going to see African Americans more asking for a divide, kind of like their own sovereign state in America, but ironically asking whites to pay for it. And there's been some talk about how whites or Asians are, going to be this kind of Eurasian elitism in, San Francisco or Silicon Valley, and you're just not allowed to talk about that culture because the culture is so new and young. It's so swept up into the white ideal of, there's no such thing as race, universalism, and I feel that a lot of this a lot of the what is to be called quote unquote social justice is actually kind of hidden within people and trying to find identity in a society that is so chaotic and based around consumerism. There's a lot of this deracination going on, and I feel that hope if there's going to be this Asianization of America, hope there needs to have this need for Eurasians to find this collective or identity, if instead of this, again, a soulless consumerism, and seeing the individualistic ideal that's America praises seems to be only something whites praise, but when it comes to a Eurasian or Asian, it doesn't really make that much sense.
Yeah, they don't. Certainly, the other races, especially the Asians, are much more collectivist. Um, my wife is very individualistic. She doesn't seem to chase after other Asians. I think though that about the Asianization of America, I'm wondering how much further that'll go. Like, because I feel like a lot of it before was taking advantage of really, really bad American laws. And I'm seeing those change very rapidly. Like, Trump is not putting up with China at all. He just did that executive order pretty well banning their tech from coming into America. So, and I know some Chinese tech students, STEM students, who were just like, oh yeah, I was planning on working in America, but that and on a visa, but now Trump changed these immigration laws, and now I don't think I can do it. And so I think that there might be a slowdown of it, but the Chinese have always been fascinated by living in America. I mean, they were coming over here to build the Transcontinental Railroad back in the 19th century. They were coming over here back then without their wives and family. And I don't know, and then too, they fought on both sides of the American Civil War. Like, the Chinese have just always been in America just about. And so I don't see them being stopped by Trumpian policies. I think them screwing over America is going to stop, but I still see them wanting to come here and live here like they've always had.
Interesting. I always it's I plan to write something in the future about this kind of Eurasianist identity or whatnot, especially
Yeah.
I feel like today in the internet scene in particular that, ironically, we're using YouTube to express our ideals and thoughts, but at the same time, YouTube is censoring even the most remote thing that's kind of anti-liberal. And so you kind of have to find this kind of audience, at least, that wants to throw money at you, which is kind of unproductive and very selfish, and you don't really create any new art and whatnot. And I feel that, the next coming year, I'm probably going to be invested in something more on the Asian studies side where I can possibly write a book or whatnot on things like this. So
It's a fascinating topic. I absolutely I've always been fascinated by this East meets West ideas, and I've really that's why I've always followed your content, because I feel like you're one of the few people out there actively recognizing and looking into this stuff about Asian futurism, Eurasianism. There, I mean, I believe I told, yeah, on the Lost Eurasians, I brought it up where it's just like anytime you look up about whites marrying Asians, it's always looked at as this porn fetish, and that's the only angle people look at it from when there's so much more to it than that.
Hmm. Oh yeah, I mean, one thing I've been particularly interested is I've been studying the Asian American porn actress scene and some of the backgrounds they come from. It's really interesting because, if we consider white male, Asian female some kind of materialistic, or I think it's safe to say a mimic desire, then why is that supposedly bad compared to some of the Asian American women into the porn industry in the West? It's different. I'm not talking about the Japanese porn industry, but certainly what's happening in America. But it's something to definitely talk about. But I don't know what to say. I'm probably gonna close it right now. I have to go do something. Is there anything else you'd like to say, Tiger?
Oh, maybe not. I think that about did it. That was kind of sudden. I can talk longer if you can, but if you can't, then yeah, we can close it.
Oh no, I was just. But we'll just have to put a bookmark it into another time.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot to talk about. So have a good night. Okay.
All right. Bye.